30.
Right.
So that is always there. So but जो कभी-कभी ऐसे भी सोचता हूँ कि 15-16 साल आया था, अब कहीं ना कहीं जाके आप सब लोगों के सानिध्य में हो रहा है.
Yes.
We will start with the chantings of Om, sitting with your spine erect, keeping your shoulders proper, keeping your chin parallel to the floor. Am I clearly audible to you all? Yes. Okay. Inhale. Thank you very much. I just wanted to confirm, where did we stop in the last session? We were doing Siddhasan, and I do knew that we had done beyond 39. So 39 shloka, I don't remember, but is it that we have done more than that, or we have done up to 39 only?
We just started brushed with 40, but it's
Acha.
39.
Okay, fine.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, last time there were two things that you had mentioned which remained in my mind. One was, of course, it is premature, but still that remark remained in my mind. You said that meditation cannot be done, it will happen.
Yes.
So that thing aroused my curiosity. And secondly, in Siddhasan, you said that the eyesight is fixed between the eyes.
Eyebrows, yeah.
Eyebrows, between the eyebrows. And then in Shavasana, what happens to the eyesight? That was one question which came in my mind. In Shavasana, you have not, I mean, nobody, they don't say that you have to fix your eyesight.
In fact,
in Siddhasan, you say you have to fix it. And then I also connected with what Sunilji said, that if you master Shavasana, half the thing you have mastered.
Right.
So all these things remained in my mind. I'm just placing it before you. It is not, you may like to answer whenever you want.
I would like to answer it now itself, because asana is a process of leading you from gross body to subtle body, and from subtle body to the causal body. Now, it depends upon a person's individual ability, capacity, उसकी कुवत के ऊपर आधारित होता है कि वो कितना आगे तक जाएगा. Here, when we talk about Shavasana, or when we talk about any other asana and Siddhasana, when I say any other asana, with classification, we should understand it can be cultural asana, which prepare. And when we talk about Shavasana, Shavasana is that type of asana which is going to bring about not only relaxation to the body, but it will prepare you for that journey to go beyond grosser state of our existence to the subtle and more further. And when we talk about Siddhasana, and when we are talking about the eyes in between the eyebrows, whether it is in between the eyebrows or whether it is on the tip of the nose, these things are meant for making your mind involved on that journey towards the higher planes, or you can say the higher states. So guiding you from the grosser state to, with that focusing in between the eyebrows, which is a physical aspect, but at times we come across uh, understanding in Hatha Pradipika only, we will be coming across it later on. And every time they say Divya Drishti Pradayini. So when we say Divya Drishti, divine vision, are we literally going to get that? But if we are more connected with the grosser aspect of our existence, that is Sthula Sharira or the material around us, then the divine things will not be that easily seen or experienced. And if you want to go into that process of experiencing that too, these are certain things which are told in the second chapter also before starting pranayama. Swatmaramji is very clear. Okay, first you have to make yourself body steady. Then you have to make your breath steady. And then you have to make your mind steady. And with all this being studied, you should allow your mind to focus on any one aspect so that you are taken ahead. Otherwise, there are many other aspects which will pull you back. So maybe the aspect of a child crying in home will pull your attention out of your sadhana. But at the same time, that drishti, Bhru Madhya Drishti, as you keep it in between the eyebrows and get connected with it totally, and you are very clear that nothing else is going to disturb me, distract me, or deviate me from this aspect, but keep me in it. That is where we are learning to go beyond. And in Shavasana, you are just surrendering. You're letting the force of energy and the inner state of your body to allow those changes to happen. Whereas here, Siddhasana is one of that four important asanas which will lead you into the state of Utpati Avastha, into Samadhi. So, in order to let that Samadhi happen, meditation has to happen. In order to let that meditation happen, concentration has to happen. In order to let that concentration happen, steadiness of the body, mind, breath has to be attained. And unless and until all these things are done, we cannot go ahead. So somewhere, Swatmaramji was very clear. If you want to bring about that kind of progress on your path, then let your faculties be focused on any one aspect, which will keep you deprived of getting again connected to the external aspects, and rather keep you connected with what's being internalized or internally. So this is how the drishti, the focusing on the chitta or the mana or the steady state of the mind, or the holding of the breath in or the flow of the breath, anything, or the relaxed state of body. These are all certain experiences which will get deep within. So this is how we have to connect it, and we have to understand the progress. Now, as Ashutosh sir suggested, okay, is it that when I am practicing and if I am not able to focus in between my eyebrows, if I'm not able to relax, that I'm not doing Shavasana or I'm not doing Siddhasana? It's not like that. In fact, you are doing it, but you are doing it at a certain level, and maybe others are doing it at another level. There are some people who are doing it at a greater level. So today, when I try to focus in between my eyebrows, I will get that headache and I will feel I'm not comfortable focusing in between my eyebrows. So it is better that you do not focus eyes and let your mind to be calm and quiet. And slowly, gradually, as you get control on your physical aspects, to start bringing changes to those mental aspects by bringing focusing in between the eyebrows, and then you will come to the realization, oh, last month when I started practicing Siddhasana, I was getting a headache. But today when I am doing focusing in between my eyebrows in my Siddhasana, I'm not experiencing headache. That means somewhere you have elevated yourself beyond the state earlier that you were experiencing in Siddhasana, and now it is something different. So that's where you have progressed. And this progress goes on, sir. In fact, it goes on for life. And that's where we are keeping on learning and doing better and better. Today, again, we were discussing the shlokas from Bhagavad Gita, the 48th and the 50th one. In the 48th one, we are coming across bringing aspects of samatva, or you can say balance in every aspect of our life. And retaining that balancing in that state, we need to master that art. We get kushalta on it, and that's where it becomes karmasu kaushalam. So that position from balancing to kushalata is a very good transition where you have mastered the art. So here also, when we are going from cultural to relaxation to meditative, you are actually mastering the art. From samatva state, you are going into profound state of samatvam, where you are having that kushalta or kaushalya in maintaining and sustaining it and going through that. When we say buddhi yukto jahati hai, so there itself we come to the feeling said earlier and being practiced and mastered. Now we are going ahead. So here also, Swatmaramji somewhere in a very beautiful way, before making us understand what are the four important asanas, he gives us the description of the third, which are like definitely for the same. So this is how we have to take it and master it, sir. Now I would like to have your feedback on that.
No, thank you, sir. You have explained it so well. And now,
Thank you.
As you can see, I have started practicing Shavasana and Siddhasana in a small way, but I am waiting for Jaykumarji's studio so that he. Yes, now it's becoming clear to me why Shavasana and Siddhasana have different ways of guiding us.
Exactly. And always remember, whenever you are practicing and if there is a slightest kind of exertion, our teachers have always told us, the moment you feel that you are unable to become progressive, take a break, do relax, do shavasana, again sit and start the initiative. You will find that you are excelling better. You know, the more you come back, take a break, and then start with some more, you will do better and better. And that's how you should progress. You can never progress by just pushing yourself, and pushing yourself. That is not how the nature helps you to go ahead.
Right.
So here, let us come to 39, where we had gone through this shloka. Chaturshiti Piteshu Siddhameva Sada Abhyaset Dvasapt Sahasranam Nadinam Malushodanam. So of these 84 asanas, only Siddhasana, which purifies the 72,000 nadis, should be practiced daily. So we are requested to practice this regularly, daily. And it is said that when you are practicing it, what should be your approach? How you should be inclined towards the practice. And the next slok says, Atmadhyayim Tahari Yavat Dvadasha Saram Sada Siddhasanam Abhyasad Yogi Nishpattim Apnuyat. Nishpattim Apnuyat is already the state of that samadhi, that manonmani or unmani. You will attain that state if for 12 years, Dvadasha Saram, for 12 years you are contemplating on that asana, making sure that you are taking moderate diet, because a kind of wrong diet, a kind of improper diet may lead you to the downfall. So here we need to understand that. And says continuously practice Siddhasana attains thereby the consummation of his yoga. Now consummation is nothing but attaining the state of self-realization. इमन्येर बहुभिः पीठैः सिद्धे सिद्धासने sati. Why we should be focusing on other if we have already learned the art of mastering Siddhasana? What is the use of doing the other practices? That means he says just take support of all asanas in order to master Siddhasana. And once if you are able to maintain in the state of Siddhasana for a prolonged manner, you are doing all the justification and no need of doing any other asanas more because you are into this which you can continue and lead yourself ahead. प्राण अनिले सावधाने प्रत्ये केवल उत्पद्यते निरायासात् स्वयमेव उन्मनि. Now the approach he is adding this. प्राण अनिले सावधाने केवल कुंभके. See, kevala kumbhak is that kumbhak where you are not trying to retain the breath in or out with your own efforts. Effortlessly, this suspension of the breath takes place. And when this is happening with the practice of Siddhasana itself, when breath is prudently restrained, attained, Unmani Avastha develops of its own accord quite easily. So he is very clear that when you have attained that placement of the feet, you have made yourself with that chin lock towards the chest, you have allowed your gaze to be focused in between your eyebrows, your hands are properly kept, and you are totally involved. And that state of sustenance with the physical body leads to the steadiness and sustenance of the slower, and at last suspended breath. And if that suspension of the breath is happening on its Kevala Kumbhaka, and if that Kevala Kumbhaka has been attained, there is no time left. You will be able to attain the Unmani Avastha also. He is very clear with that aspect. So, this Siddhasana, if you are practicing regularly, there are great chances that as you are progressing, these are the kind of feedback experience you will be going through, and this will lead to Unmani Avastha. So, you are guided step by step through Siddhasana. Only an asana, which is a meditative pose, which brings in the altering of meditation, has to happen on its own. And you are going ahead beyond that. And then he says in the next one, Tatha ekasmin in eva dride baddhe siddhasane sada bandhatrayam anayasat swayameva upjayate. Now, this bandhatraya, the bandhatraya is Moola Bandha, Jalandhar Bandha, and Udyan Bandha. Moola Bandha is anal lock, Jalandhar Bandha is chin lock, and Udyan Bandha is the navel lock. These three locks are part of where we will be learning this Bandha Traya. And being part and parcel of Mudra, these three bandhas we will be learning also in the second chapter to practice Kumbhaka phase. And here we are introduced in itself, which is because of the practice of Siddhasana, take note, the three bandhas automatically because with the pressing of the heels, it is as if you have come across Moola Bandha. With the placement of the chin on the chest, it is like you have gone into the state of Jalandhar Bandha. And since you have suspended the breath either in or out, it is like there is a contraction of the navel which is going back of your spine or towards your back of the body. when this kind of retention and maintenance is being done because of the practice, it is said that the Bandhatraya is happening automatically. So there he says, Tatha ekasmin neva dride. If you have done this practice and regularly, and if you have made yourself very much stabilized in it, Baddhe Siddhasane Sada, Bandhatrayam Anayasat Swayameva Upajayate. Anayasat, very easily, on its own, automatically, this three bandhas you will find that they are taking place. And that's where he says, Na asanam siddha sadrusham, na kumbha keval upamaha, na khechari sama mudra, na uh, sadrusho layah. There is no greater laya yoga than that of nada yoga. There is no mudra greater than that of khechari. And there is no greater kumbhaka or pranayama than a kevala kumbhaka. Time he says there is no other asana which is higher to that of Siddhasana. So Siddhasana he gives it a state of higher level or higher order. Says if you have mastered this, and earlier we have come across one thing also, if you have mastered it and practiced it for 12 years, frankly telling that you will be, when I came across and started understanding after reading thrice, 4 times, by that time I was already 15-year-old in my yogic journey. And I was wondering if this would have read earlier and I would have started practicing Siddhasana, by now I might have achieved the state of Unmani Avastha. So time not lost. Life is there with us always. Without how many days you are going to live further, let us start practicing from the moment itself, and it will certainly going to bring success to us. So here we have done Siddhasana. Anything there in your mind that you would like to add to it, share for it? Should we move further? Yeah. Ashutosh sir, would you like to unmute yourself?
The first chapter itself, this Unmani has not been explained, or Keval Kumbhak also has not been explained, but he is stressing it and bringing it in the first chapter without explaining it.
Yeah, because he has already
so there must be some purpose in bringing it in the first chapter itself.
Let me bring you back to earlier understanding where he says ekante matika madhye statavyam guru updishta margena sada abhyase. So first you have to go through this learning and then start applying it and practicing it by coming to the ekanta, by coming to that place which is away from every kind of disturbance, and you are isolated in that hut, and then you are starting with the practice. So it is like, you have attained primary learning, you have made yourself gone through the secondary education, from the intermediate now you have become a graduate, and now it is a time to apply everything so that you know what is Unmani, and you have also learned how Siddhasana is going to help you. Now it is a time for the application. So Shravan and Manan has been done. Now it is time to do the So it is a time for application. So Manan, reflection and application is what you are coming to. But first Shravana has to happen. Unless and until that happens, we are not ready for the same. So this is the approach that you go through, and it becomes clear with Swatmaranji's teaching, because many places you will find that he is coming back to the basics and nothing going ahead. And many places you will see that he has not explained three bandhas, he has not explained Kevala Kumbhaka, he has not explained Khetari Mudra, and he still says that this is what it is. So this is a way of his poetical language of how to take this subject, how to understand it, and then we have to bring it into practice and practical understanding. So no doubt, sir has started, but at the same time, as we are going ahead, let us bring every other aspect also into consideration, and you will find it very fruitful. How, if we are excelling in Siddhasana, then what are the other things that we have to be in our control? Later on, you will also come across that statement in the shloka, Brahmachari, Mitahari, Tyagi, Yoga Prayana. You have to bring about that control on your senses. You have to practice Vairagya. You have to bring control on your diet. And if this control are there, then only whatever I have told you since start, you will be able to experience success. Otherwise, it is going into waste. That's what Swatmaranti tells us ahead also. So here also, first we have to discipline ourselves. First, we have to get acquainted in that. Today morning we were discussing, hey, let us bring a practice of one value every day. That I am not going to become angry today, as sir said. So this is also the same thing, sir. We have to connect with that. So every day we are learning an aspect and getting connected to it and bringing it into our culture. That is the preparation going on. That is the disciplining happening. Let us come to Padmasana now. Vama uru upri dakshinam cha charanam samstha. Daksho uru upari पश्चिमेन विधिना धृत्वा कराभ्याम दृढ़म अंगुष्ठौ हृदये निधाय नासाग्रम आलोकयेत एतद् व्याधि विनाशकारी यमिनाम padmasanam prauchate. Now here he says, he talks about focusing on the tip of the nose rather than in between. Padmasana is connected to the nasagra drishti. Vama uru upari dakshinam vamam tatha. Fixing the right foot on the left thigh and the left foot on the right thigh. Daksho upari. Paschimena vidhina dhrutva karabhyam dridam. Paschimena means take behind towards your back, both the hands. And karabhyam dridam. What? Angushtav. With your hands you are holding the right hand, the right big toe, the left hand, the left big toe. Hridaye nidhaya chibukam asakayet etad vyadhi vinashakari. So as we are crossing our hands and holding toes of the feet, same feet in fact, the chin has to be fixed on the chest and the tip of nose should be gazed at. This is known as Padmasana, which destroys the diseases of yogis. Etad vyadhi vinashakari, as a destroyer of the diseases, it says. But when we talk about destroyer of the disease, to understand the level of practice, here I am getting connected the definition of abhyas from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, where he says tatra sito yatno. That is abhyasa, where the efforts are continuous. In the next sutra, he says, sa tu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevit. Dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevit. And then he says, in the definition, tatra sito. Tatra sito, where? To get established in that state of chitta vritti virodha. The efforts has to be intense. And that intense effort should be regular, dirghakala, for a longer period. Nairantarya, without any interruption. Satkara asevitu, with devotion, dedication, where you are developing that kind of firm footing in it. Now, with this definition and this, when you are practicing Padmasana, maybe that will be the time that you will be coming across this word Vyadhi Vinashakari. We cannot say, hey, you have tried Padmasana and somehow with the force that you have lifted the leg and put it on the opposite thigh and there is a pain in the knee. So let me tell you, this Padmasana will be not Vinashakari, but Vyadhi Avishkari. It will bring in the Vyadhi. We have to be very careful. There we have to understand the aspect and the ability of the body to perform it. Unless and until the body is able, that we should not get into it. And this can be understood only under the guidance of a teacher, because teacher understands you as your body is working, moving, getting stretched, getting pulled, compressed, and bending. That is where the teacher will make you aware. Yes, now you are ready. You can go ahead to do Padmasana also. And when you do Padmasana after that preparation, there will be a different kind of state of mind. And with this concentration, with your chin coming to the chest and on the tip of the, you are becoming totally inclined within yourself. That is where the Vyadhi Vinashkari may happen. And this is called Padmasana. Usually, Padmasana with our hands on the knees in any mudra, maybe Chin Mudra or Jnana Mudra or any other mudra. But here, Padmaraji has defined Padmasana as Baddha Padmasana, where he is asking us to take our hands at the back and hold the clothes. At the same time, he is giving us two more variations. And when he talks about these variations, he is also saying to us, these variations are not mine, but these variations are coming from the great yogis like Matsyendra and all. So let us try to understand these two shlokas and the variation given in there. Uttano charano krutva Guru संस्थौ प्रयत्नतः गुरु मध्ये तथो उत्तानो पाणि कृत्वा ततो नासाग्रे विन्यसेद विन्यसेद राजदंत मूले तु जीवया उत्तम्भ्य चिबुकम वक्षस्य उत्थाप्य तनं शनैः. Now see, here he is giving us a kind of understanding where we have to do some kind of adjustment with our breath. And this is another opinion. What it is saying, with an effort fixing on the thighs, the 2 feet turned upward. That means somehow the soles of the feet are turned up. And as they are placed on the opposite thighs, the heels are coming very close to each other near the pubic bone. And in the very similar manner as said before, placing the chin on the chest, palm turned upwards on the region between the two thighs. Now, the region between the two thighs means the right thigh, the left thigh, in between them, these are the two upturned feet with their heels almost closer to each other, touching each other, very much pressing the pubic bone. And that is where he is telling us to keep the hands upturned towards the ceiling. And as we have done that, we have to raise the prana slowly. Now, what is that raising the prana slowly? When you sit in Padmasana, already there is a very good stretch on your glutes, where a kind of anal suction, contraction usually happens automatically. But there are people who are very flexible. There are people who may not be experiencing this. So when he says, let the prana rise slowly, and prana at all the levels. And which is that prana which is down, which has to be raised up? So then it becomes clear that it is the apana prana, which has to be directed upward. The prana is in your chest. Amana prana is in your upper abdomen epigastric region. And apana prana is below the navel. And that is the functioning of the whatever you can excretion, delivery of the baby, and the removal of the impurities and everything. So this is with the apana vayu. And now he's talking about raising that apana vayu up. One should fix the gaze on the tip of the nose and press the tongue against the hard palate. Now, pressing the tongue against the hard palate is the practice of Jivaha Bandha. The tongue, the tip of the tongue kept at the root of the upper tip, and the surface of the tongue is taken upward and fixed at the hard palate. That is the roof of your oral cavity, where you allow your surface of the tongue to go ahead and get stuck over there. It is like, giving a very good stretch on your frenum. If I'm doing it and showing you by keeping my chin out, it is like this. Have you seen that? The tongue and the frenum which is below the tongue is getting wide stretched and it is going up. But he has not told us about anything like opening the mouth and doing it. Here he just says the tongue should be touching the hard palate and doesn't mention whether the tongue has to be turned backward or where. But just says that it has to touch the hard palate. Now there are many diversions regarding this aspect of keeping the tongue. In fact, one day when I was discussing this with my teacher told Sabir, when you do chin lock, you just do the chin lock and see, you will find that the tongue is already touching your hard palate. So I just took my chin here and observed it. And literally, the tongue was touching my hard palate. I could experience that. So this is the guidance of the teachers, when you try to clarify certain doubts and they come out with their wisdom and they tell you, okay, see, when you are doing chin lock, already your tongue is touching the hard palate. Then I said, then why, sir, this fellow has mentioned that we should be touching our tongue to the hard palate when it's already touching? That is where we need to become focused upon, with our tongue touching the hard palate and with our gaze coming on the tip of the nose, we will be completely de-alienated from the other aspects of our life. And we will get involved into the mental. And that is where we are taught the practice of an asana at three levels. One is the local effect, second one is the associated effect, and the third one is the mental effect or the central effect. This you people can note it down. When I say local effect, then the local effect is that part of the physical body. Local effect is that part of the physical body where the stretching, twisting, pulling, compression, or certain changes are taking place with relation to the flexibility. And when I talk about associated effect, along with that local effect, now suppose if I am doing Bhujangasana for just to make you understand, or if I am doing Dhanurasana, as we have learned Dhanurasana. So Dhanurasana, you are lying down on your abdomen, catching hold of your big toes and bringing them closer to the ears as per the technique of Hatha Pradipika. Now, is it that local effect is at abdomen or the spine? Yes, of course, because these are the region, the spinal column and the abdomen, they are getting locally affected. Where is the associated effect? The associated effect may be at the knees, maybe at the chest, maybe at the throat region, an anterior stretch to your glands in the throat region, that is thyroid parathyroid glands. There may be a very good passive stretch on the ligaments around the knees, on the patella, the kneecap, as well as the ligaments which are supporting at the back of the knee. So all these changes are taking place. And the local effect is the spine. Local effect is the tummy, or you can say the abdominal region. Even the associated effect can be said about your chest, where the rib cage is opening up, where the chest is opening up. All these things are happening. Where is the central effect here? The central effect will also be coming into it when we are devoting into that aspect of Ananta Samapatti, submitting to that infinity. And that is where we are bringing that culturing with the fixing of the gaze either on in between the eyebrows or on the tip of the nose, or letting our tongue to get stick to the hard palate. This is where we are going beyond the physical, This is where we are going beyond the other associated effect, and we are coming into the mental effect. And then Patanjali says, "Tapodbandhu anabhighataha." That is where your conflicts are dissolved. And this is where we have to understand this Padmasana also. When you have gone through this kind of placement of the legs and holding or placement of the hands, and then when you have gone to keep your chin on the chest, focusing here and there, and getting totally involved from physical to subtle, from subtle to the. This is the beauty of performing these asanas, which are really the four important asanas which we have done. Out of four, we have done two. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference between the effect of fixing the gaze between the eyebrows and fixing the gaze on the tip of the nose? There must
In
be,
fact,
but I just wanted to know.
there is a difference. In fact, the same question I asked my teacher. I am really glad I was blessed with such kind of teachers who told me, Sabir, it doesn't matter because what you are doing as a fixing of the gaze is a physical action. You have to understand the depth behind it, where it leads you beyond your mind. You have to understand that whether you're. Now, let me clarify this one more thing to you, sir. When you go and try to understand Siddhasana from text, there are texts which tell you to fix the gaze on the tip of the nose. So, should we say that Hatha Pratipika is saying fixing the gaze in between the eyebrows, and here it is fixing on the nose? So, either of them is wrong. No, they both are correct. In fact, we have to understand what is the understanding between the fixing of the gaze. That is like, withdrawing your senses and becoming totally internalized and going beyond it. That is where the drishti is very important for us to go beyond. But as you asked, and I asked my teacher said, yes, there is a difference. When you fix your gaze in between your eyebrows, and when you fix your gaze on the tip of the nose, fixing your gaze on the tip of the nose is easier than fixing it in between the eyebrows. I said, sir, it may be other way also. Yes, it may be other way also. If it is easier for you to fix it on the tip of the nose, and mind you, it is very clear that today you are fixing it on the tip of the nose, tomorrow you can go ahead and fix it in between your eyebrows. That is the elevation and progression in your practice. And if you are not comfortable, and with benefit point, there are 12 cranial nerves which are coming out from the back of our head through the spinal region, the upper spinal region, the cervical region, and into our senses. When we fix our gaze in between the eyebrows or on the tip of the nose, let me tell you, these optical nerves, olfactory nerves, or you can say the nerves connected to your ears, these are the cranial nerves which are going through suitable changes. So when you are at the tip of the nose, maybe the nerve connected with the nose, mouth, and the throat region is getting affected more, or I should say, is becoming efficient more. And when you fix your gaze in between the eyebrows, the above, and you are able to do that, then maybe the upper one, beyond the olfactory, the optical nerves, and the other cranial nerves, like the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagal nerve, which is the vagus nerve. This vagus nerve is not only subjected to the senses, but at the same time, it is connected with the glandular system. It is connected with the respiratory. It is connected with the circulatory. It is even connected with your digestive system. And when we are under the stress, this is the vagal nerve which deprives the mind of various other understandings, and we become frustrated, or we come to anger, or we become to the conflicts. And when we are doing asana in such a manner, it is said that not only you are culturing your nerves or your nadis, but at the same time you are helping stressful situation and coming to a state of balance, that state of samatvam. So this is how, sir, we have to understand this true aspect, fixing of the gaze on the tip of the nose or in between your eyebrows. Going ahead, he says, Idam Padmasanam Proktam Sarva Vyadhi Vinashanam Durlabam Yena Kena Api Himata Labhyate Bhuvi. This asan, which is Padma, Sarva Vyadhi Vinashanam, is going to destroy all the diseases. He is the one which will destroy all the diseases. When we say destroy all the diseases, in the first place, I want to tell you that you will not come across the diseases. It is a very good preventive measure which is telling you, yes, you are so good with your health that the vyadhis are not coming to you because you are into that state of your prime health. Attained by one and all. What cannot be attained by one and all? The Padmasana. There is a person who is very flexible. He is a gymnast. And when I tell that person to do Padmasana, वो बोलता है, "तो योगी लोग देखकर कुछ बड़ा काम नहीं करते हो। देखो मैंने तो कभी जिंदगी में आज तक तुमको पद्मासन मैं तुम्हारे से अच्छा करके दिखा सकता हूँ." एंड ही डज पद्मासन. अभी तुम बोलो और क्या करने का है. एंड साबिर भाई टेल्स हिम, अभी अपना चिन को चेस्ट के पास लगाओ, नजर को ये जो है ना अपने टिप ऑफ द नोज पे फोकस करो. वो सब करता है और माइंड के अंदर उसकी एक ही बात रहती है कि दिस इज साबिर भाई टेलिंग मी टू डू एंड आई एम शोइंग हिम दैट आई कैन डू इट. That is where your external ego or your external self is working on your mind and you are not directing yourself to the internal one. So we have to bifurcate. When we talk about ego, when we talk about the self, whether it is the self that you are identifying yourself with name, fame, position, and abilities, or you are identifying yourself with that self which is beyond name, fame, positions, and abilities, which require just to shed everything as it is and go in. Today also we were discussing in Bhagavad Gita class about the same, about our approach, about the shloka number 47, that how we should be understanding our Swadharma. Now here, the Swadharma of a Hatha Yogi is to Hatha Yoga in such a manner that it is leading him from his usual physical self to the self beyond all this. Now, this is where the Swadharma of a Hatha Yogi will be comprised of. And we are all practitioners of yoga of various types. If I am looking after my home, my family, my kids, I'm working, I'm teaching, this is also my dharma. This is a Swadharma, which is bringing something connected to me in my material life. But at the same time, the same dharma is going to lead me wholeheartedly, dedicatedly, understanding my duty. And when I'm doing it, the time will come automatically. Arabha is taken over and we are going ahead very much deep within. So that is a transition shift from the two swa, from the two identities of the self, one which is external and one which is internal. So here it is a very good explanation by Hatha Yoga, which is talking about the same thing of the shifting from one ego to the other ego, one asmita, which is impure one, or I should not say impure, but which is connected to the material world. And there is another one, which is the true one, which is connected to the internal, that is the self itself. So this is how we can understand that how asana can lead a person who is affected with vyadhis, with stress, and then he comes to his usual self and understand, I don't understand why I'm experiencing all these problems where there is no problem. If I'm identifying myself with the problems and just having belief, I am facing this problem, I am in problem. If I just bring a belief, I am not facing any problem, there is no problem, then there is no problem because you have not identified yourself with that. This is where Hatha Yoga brings about the bifurcation, that separation between the two. Understanding of the Siddhasana or Padmasana is a journey which is leading us from our unusual self to the true usual self. So this is also the progress or the path of yoga that we need to understand and get connected to. I hope you are getting connected with the practical aspect and at the same time the theoretical aspect which are being explained to us in the other philosophical texts like Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Your comments, sir.
I mean, without that understanding which you have shared, the gymnast example that you gave will be only doing gymnastics and puffing up his false ego, or what you
Yes.
called as
Material ego.
Material ego, yeah. And then the whole purpose will not be served. So it's very useful, very extremely essential to have this understanding.
Yes, and this was said by the great teacher Guruji B.K.S. Iyengar. And he told, if I am doing these asanas properly and you are appreciating and clapping your hands to my performance, then let me tell you one thing, a gymnast can do better than me. The gymnast is not doing yoga and I am doing yoga. So that was the beauty of his explanation. And it came from the great Iyengarji. And this is really, pepping our practice, that we should also be focused on. And then Swatmaranji comes across with another version of Padmasana, where he says, Ke Pashad Uktam Matsyendra Matam. Now he is telling us the view of Matsyendranath ji. So he says, Krutva Samputito Karo Drudtam Badhva tu Padmasanam Gadam Shasi Sannidhaya Chibukam Dhyayanshcha Tatchetasi Varam Varam Apana Urdhvam Anilam Utsarayan Puritam Munchana Pranam Upaiti Bodhamatulam Shakti Prabhavannaraha. Now here he says, assuming firmly Utva Samputito Karudparam, the Padmasan pose where the hands are being rested upon one another on the legs so as to create a hollow to the palms. When you say Gadam Vakshasi Sannidhaya Chibukam, the chest is coming to the chest. Dhyayashcha Chetasi. And with this, as you are focused completely on your breath, raising the Apan Vayu, Varam Varam Apan Urvam Anilam. You're raising the Apan Vayu, exhaling and inhaling the prana, means you're in the prana. And he says, you are meditating upon that supreme reality. Once the yogi attains this kind of unparalleled state of knowledge, he is into supreme realization, experience of the self. Now, here only one difference we can see. Of course, there is a difference from the earlier two. Here also we are told to keep our chin on the chest. We are told to do two different things. One is that as you inhale and exhale, we should always try to raise the apan upward. As we are being told to do this, we are also asked to keep the hand position with a hollow. Now, when we say the hollow position of the hand, is it to do with like this, or is it to do something like this, is to be understood. Now, what is the positioning of the hand? Whether it is just to interlock the fingers and just connect it like this, whether it is this way. Now, this need to be understood literally with the help of people who are having proper understanding of the Sanskrit knowledge and what it is trying to say. So here, Ashutosh sir, I will require your help, where it is making us understand, okay, as you are keeping the hands there in that hollow-like position, so how you are going to connect it, whether it is really hollow or it is just that we are keeping both hands facing the ceiling as in the previous version.
Samputita would mean that they are joined together.
Yes.
And hollow. What you showed earlier was the, that I would consider as Samputya. This is Samputita. Yeah.
Achha, this is Samputita.
Samputita, yeah. Yeah. So
Yes.
So that I don't know why it is also said Dridhataram
Huh.
Badhva.
Huh.
This is something which I am not able to. How Samputitau Karau and Dridhataram will go together.
Is it like this?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe, that's right.
Yeah.
Badhva means
Huh.
by tying up. So what you
Binding
showed
it.
just,
Yes.
yeah, what you showed
Yes.
makes better sense of the Sanskrit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
But sir, I
and
have a question,
huh.
not related to Samputita Karau, but when the natural direction of Apana, as you mentioned, is downward, why are we trying to go against nature and trying to raise it upward in this
Sir,
asana?
exactly. The nature is downward, and if we want to realize the self, then we have to go against the flow. If we are flowing with the nature, then we are connected to Maya, we are connected with Prakriti, we are connected with that illusion. And if we are going against the flow, away from it, we are trying to connect ourselves with that Shivoham, as very well said by the great Adi Shankaracharya, where he says, I am not this, I am not this, I am not this, I am not this. What I am is Sada, है ना? Chidananda Rupa, Shivoham. So when we are with the natural flows, we are connected with excretion. When we are connected with excretion, or when we are connected, when we are connected with the other desires related to this region, or vasanas or functionings of this region, we will be connected to the material world and its understanding. We will be always be into more accumulation of the karmas. And the Sanchita karma is never going down. It is, even if it is spent in this Janma, there are many more, much more added to it again. And the Prarabdha and Sanchit karma is going on as a cycle. That is where you are involved in the Mrityu and Janma. So if you want to come out of this against coming out of it, then you have to go against the flow. So the Apan Vayu, which is always directed essence, we need to make it upward so that this connectivity to the materialism, to the illusion, to the Maya is somewhere broken. And this aspect of Hatha Yoga related to Kundalini, where if the Apanvayu is directed downward, then it is said that this, according to Gheranda Samhita, this 3.5 coiled Kundalini Shakti is there in the dormant state, in Supta Avastha. And when it is in Supta Avastha, mind you, you are ignorant about the reality, the truth. And when you are ignorant about the reality, you are into is you are into the cycle of birth and death. You are committing karmas, actions, and you are expecting fruits out of it. You are into only the karma phala aspect and being through that. Now, when we say that we want to realize ourselves, get mukti, get moksha, and somewhere this trend has to be stopped and we have to go in the other direction. So the apana urdhvam is nothing but the going in the other direction. The aspect is
Sir,
like, yes.
but then there will be some bodily consequences, no? If I because the apana also has a bodily function, and if I am pushing apana upwards, then bodily consequence may be that I will lose my appetite or hunger over a period of time. Is that so?
In fact, later on you will come across, okay, once you have come to this state where your inhalation and exhalation is profound and stabilized, you won't require food to sustain. You will lose everything. अगर खाना ही अंदर नहीं जाता है, if you are not having that food to eat and digest, and the byproduct to be removed and the other product to be utilized by the body, if this work is done by prana itself, that means in the physical form, if the anna is not getting into the body, when the byproduct is not created. And when the byproduct is not created, there is no way of letting the functional or Saman Vayu to become more functional. Rather, the Prana Vayu, which is the source of this sustenance of the body, it gets connected with the body and the external source in such a way that the balance itself sustains you. And there you do not require any kind of food material to sustain. But the material that you require is only prana, prana, and prana. So the usual functioning of the body will slowly get reduced, and a day will come where it will become stopped. And that is the reason that people coming into yoga say, nowadays I experience that I am not excreting stool that I used to excrete earlier. I am not going for urination that much as I used to go earlier. I am not getting connected to my other desires as I was connected earlier. I am slowly getting detached by myself. This is because coming into the practice of yoga, the culturing of the body, the culturing of the mind is disciplining you to such a great extent that you are not depending on any kind of external sources, but the internal source of prana itself sustains you. And that is where you go beyond the physical bodily aspect to the other aspect of your existence. And as you said, hey, don't you think that I will be doing injustice to my appetite or my other activities of my life? The other activities of the life, anyhow, has to be stopped if you want to go to that level, if you want to go ahead. So, to stopping that, this sadhana is to be understood and to be practiced and disciplined. And you are not only getting disciplined with respect to having something in and sustaining, but you are becoming one with that sustenance power of prana. It sustains you and leads you ahead. That's why, sir, I would like to share here. There are people who went into the state of samadhi and remain sustained without food, air, or anything like that, and were very much stable with their physical body, mind, as well as the functioning of the heart and the breaths. Everything was going on. Why? Because it was prana which had been completely sustained and able in that body. So that body doesn't require any other form of prana supplement, because anna is a prana supplement, breath is the prana supplement, water is the prana supplement. But now with your practice, you are gone beyond all these things. Sir, unmute.
So does it mean that my intake of food will go down as I...
Not only go down, it will stop.
You have... Oh, I see. Okay.
Not only go down, it will stop. Said in this second chapter of this very text in the Kumbhaka chapter in Pranayama, where it is said, as you're regularly practicing Pranayama, you will find that the body is not producing malas. So there won't be any excretion out of the body in the form of toxins or fecal matter or anything else. In fact, whatever sweating also you are coming across, none of the same on your body. It is being said like that. So see the beauty of the even the excretion out of the body of that yogi who's practicing yoga is like a utilization of prana itself. That's how we have to understand things of Hatha Yoga. So I hope this is where I'm connecting.
So just to narrate, I think it's anecdotal. Apparently in Egypt, somewhere around the year 1980, so there was a yogi who, voluntarily got buried a few feet under the ground and said, okay, after 40 years, you please take me out. And then it so happened that, 40 years is a long time. So slowly he was forgotten while there. And then around the year, 1920 or so, about that time, there's some research student who was, researching on these matters, and then he came across this, and he realized, oh my God, the yogi is still there. And he was actually taken out and he lived for 3 more years thereafter. So 40 years the yogi could survive basically on the prana.
On the prana.
Without any intake, without any excretion on this, and apparently in good health because 3 more years he lived.
Yes, very true. And and to second your saying, Swami Rama in his book Himalayan Masters, if you have gone through this, sir, you will come across the understanding of the yogis practicing in the Himalayas in order to protect themselves, not to protect, staying in that kind of atmosphere. They were developing heat in their body. In such a way, their body is the furnace, and the fire is emanating, or the light is emanating out of their body. It is red, hot, orange colored physical body which is sustaining itself into the Himalaya. So where do they require the kind of atmospherical relevances to protect their body, save themselves from the fury of the nature? They were the nature itself. They have made their body so compatible to the nature. And if you read autobiography of Yogi, the great Swamiji, Dayananda, Yogananda Saraswati, he mentions about the powers of Yukteswari Giri Maharaj. And he says, hey, Yukteswar Giri Maharaj was going through a phase where he never ate food. And whenever we used to see him, he was like that for years around. And his sadhana was such that, in fact, we were expecting light in that room. And the moment with our expectation, we were going to that room without taking the light inside, Swamiji's body itself used to be so much everything around, and he was in his sadhana. So his body was the source of the light. Now, how to fathom these aspects of how to go and understand these things? It is really wonderful knowledge of Hatha Yoga, which makes us that capable that our body becomes a source of prana. That means we have made ourselves one with this energy of prana itself. That is the beauty of practicing this yoga. So this is how we have to relate it, sir, because these are the true stories which have been explained in the books. And as Sunil Bhai also suggested, Sunil Bhai, one more thing.
Just one more to add to this. In olden times, in Lhasa University, the medical graduates had to go through a final exam. And the exam was that on a cold night, they had to stand outside, and they were given cotton robes, and they had to, make those robes wet through the power of heat, through sweat. And this had to be done 7 times during the night.
My goodness.
So only when they were able to do this 7 times in the night, they were able to wet the robes, and those robes had to be changed. When they were able to produce so much heat in their body, they had so much command of their own selves, then they were, pronounced as fit to treat other people and other patients.
Very true. And one such example which comes in our the Bhumi of Maharashtra itself, Sant Jnaneshwar. Once his sister wanted to cook the chapatis, and Sant Jnaneshwar, when there was no fuel supplement or the arrangement available, Sant Jnaneshwar gave his back to her and to his sister and told her that she can bake the chapatis on her back itself. And his back was working like a hot plate on the fire, and such chapatis were made. And he was a great Hatha Yogi. With his past incarnation, he has carried it forward into this incarnation. And in this incarnation, he was supposed to realize himself and go ahead. And see, at the age of 6 or 7, he was having the knowledge of all the Shastra, Veda Shastra and all. And by the time he was 16, he was already advocating and showing siddhis and all to guide people and make them understand how they can guide themselves into the practice of Hatha Yoga and still go ahead into the awakening of the Kundalini and experience it. And there are so many examples and stories, metaphorical stories with his Hatha Yogic Siddhis. Today also in Alandi, we can experience his power there by just going and experiencing the vibes. And if at all, Sunil Bhai, if you come across in Maharashtra during this Wari period, where all the Warkaris go to Pandharpur from Alandi in their procession, when you come to Alandi, you will experience such kind of energies where you will feel renewed vigor. And scientifically, many scientists have come and tried to understand what is that energy which is making all this happen over here. And they came to only one thing, understanding that there is some living force which is still sustaining such kind of higher level of vibes, which is healing people and making people more sound in the process of yoga. So this is how the great power of yoga comes here.
Mahendra ji has one anecdote relating to Dhirendra Brahmachari ji, Swami Dhirendra Brahmachari. Mahendra ji?
Good.
Mahendra ji is there? Ah.
Yeah, he is there.
Sir.
Got it. It relates to my job. I was during my service as a customs officer, I was posted at the Delhi airport. And one fine night, you know, the temperature in the night in January and December remains 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 5 degrees. Fog, difficult for flights to land. So during one such night, one of the sadhus came, group of sadhus came. And such a chill weather, they were putting on only one dhoti. And it was a group of Dhirendra Brahmachari. So when he entered, there was sufficient time for us to interact with him. I'm talking about 84, 83, 84. Some interaction with Dhirendra Brahmachari ji. So in the time their back comes. I asked him, sir, you are putting on only one cloth? So he says, Are Baba, it's very hot here. I am coming from Russia. It was minus 40 there. And when my plane landed and I came out of the aircraft with one cloth, they called the ambulance. This man will die. He has to be taken into the ambulance. But then he said, no, it's okay. It's fine for me. At that temperature, that's what he said. At that temperature, they maintain the same cloth. If not 40, maybe minus 30, minus 20, definitely cooler. Or even in Delhi temperature of 3-4 degrees, keeping one cloth was amazing for all of us. There were so many officers at the Delhi airport that time. It was a small. So that's one experience where I was moved to join Dhirendra Brahmachari ji. The next week I was in his ashram. And we had different conversations there. But one living example.
True.
To this, I think is yesterday only I got my video camera, which was lost about 10 years. Now this video camera had beautiful recordings. I still have. I have gone to the city of Allahabad during Kumbh Mela. And so many yogis has come there. You know, the Nagas, the Kanpatas, so many there. And I have some of the recordings of them. One of the sadhus, he was standing, raising his hand for the 21 years. Raising his hands for 21 years, I have got the video. Standing on one leg for quite a long time. And there were so many others also. Fortunately, he's recovered recently. So it's something that we have seen in our life. So it's a living proof, or you can say, or what else I can add to this? Definitely. powers,
you, sir.
miraculous powers.
Right, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Right. So I think with that we come to the end of the class. Very interesting. And so let's move with the prayer now. Oh. Purnamada